Welcome to Speak Easy Doctors, where we talk about life and how to navigate it with a little more communication. I'm Dr. J.
And I'm Dr. D. We're two BFFs with PhDs in communication, but most importantly, we're human beings figuring things out just like you.
From everyday conversations to life's bigger moments, we're here to explore how words shape our views, experiences, and relationships.
No scripts, no lectures, just honest conversations about life and speaking easier.
So, let's dive in. This is Speak Easy Doctors.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing shared here is intended as medical or mental health advice. One of the hosts is a licensed counselor, but the conversation should not replace professional care or therapy. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for any personal concerns. Both hosts are PhDs in communication, and our goal in this podcast is to inform and inspire, not to diagnose or treat.
Welcome to another episode of Speak Easy Doctors. Hello, listeners. I hope you're doing well today. How are you, Dr. J?
Doing good, Dr. D. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. So today's topic, we're kind of doing a follow-on on love languages. So today's topic is, what is today's topic?
The 5 anger languages.
Anger languages. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, there's no one theorist or author. This is all based on Gary Chapman's work from 1992, I believe it was, the love languages. It's just understanding how people communicate, because I think especially in American culture, anger is very prevalent. And I think from a young age, we're taught anger is okay, depending on who you are. It's a normal reaction. And I think it's even, I don't know, would you say it's normalized to be angry, especially from our generation?
Maybe for our generation, but I don't think anger is normalized necessarily for society.
Right.
I think there are people that try to see anger as an extreme to being mad or irritated. So there are levels and gradients to what anger is. And I think anger is really an emotion and a reaction. Some people even define it as a secondary emotion, an outer layer to an inner emotion.
Right. Usually fear, pain, those are the primary emotions, and anger is a byproduct of that.
And again, I think that these distinctions depend on the theorist or the researcher, but anger generally is an emotion, and it could be, I think it could be a primary or a secondary emotion.
Yes. So just very quickly, a rundown of the 5 types of anger, all of which you are very familiar with, yes?
Maybe a few.
So number 1, there's righteous anger. And that's simply saying, oh, I'm right, you're wrong. Some people call that gaslighting too. I don't know if that's the case. But indignation, kind of a surprise. How could you? How could you do this? This is completely a surprise to me. Anyways. Retribution, revenge, eye for an eye, you will pay for what you did. A distraction of some kind, just sidestepping, changing the subject, so to take the attention off of yourself and maybe onto something else or someone else. And finally, justification, karma, you had it coming, it's your fault, you deserve that. That's a quick rundown of the 5. I'm sure we'll get into the details as the podcast moves forward.
Yeah, I also looked into this a little bit more. And what I found is that one person describes it as a tendency to speak when a core or emotional need or feeling is threatened or unmet. So if we have an unmet need, we may automatically go to one of these anger languages. It really shows up less because someone wants to be, it's not about wanting to be angry. So we can't really say that this is, I don't even know if that word is the right way to characterize all of this. I might even take issue with using the word anger as a way to describe these, as I feel like they're more reactions to things. But we can just, for the sake of fun and the fact that this is how it's been delineated in media and in different ways, we can call them anger languages. But usually it seems like people activate these types of languages or this way of communicating when they have something deeper inside of them activated, like shame, fear, injustice, rejection, less control over a particular situation. So, for example, with righteousness, when someone feels like a rule or a boundary has been crossed, we might feel a sense of injustice. And so we will have this righteousness. Typically, when we feel unfair, like something is unfair, we might have a righteous language, which is under this is an anger language. Indignation, when a person feels like they're being dismissed, for example, they might respond back with some tone or sarcasm. Especially when they're feeling talked down to. And then when we think about retribution, when someone is hurt and wants the other person to feel the same thing too. Think of the ways that we communicate that. And then distraction, when we don't even want to deal with whatever conflict. This is very common for conflict avoidant people. We might go ahead and look at TikTok or just Netflix all day, just to avoid something that we don't want to look at, which can be healthy and emotionally safe and sometimes very, very unhealthy for us. And then justification, when someone feels blamed or misunderstood, we need to prove through our anger language that we are valid and logical. It could be that justification is over explaining because we want to feel heard. So in a way, I feel like they each individually stand on their own. They're not just about anger, but for the sake of fun, we'll call them anger languages.
Right. Yeah. And I guess it's very similar to the love languages. I think these start to develop in childhood. So I guess maybe we should start there. When your earliest memories of feeling anger or expressing being misunderstood or expressing some sort of injustice.
We have talked about this. I hate when you ask me about my early memory. I don't know.
But there was such a pivotal time in your life, though.
Yeah, but I don't know what my earliest, I cannot. Okay, so when I look at my memories, it never comes up as this came first or this came second.
Okay.
It kind of gets drawn into my brain like, oh, this happened.
Okay, can I ask you then high school? And it doesn't have to be the first. It could just be an instance in high school where you were angry.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just answer it without any kind of directive here.
That's fine.
In general, back in the day, conflict, if I have conflict with someone, I would go straight to rage. And I would probably utilize all 5 of these languages quite well and in a more magnified sense. My number one reason being is that my mother, she used to tell me that she loved the feeling of anger. She loved being angry. And so, in a lot of ways, how I communicated was modeled based on many forms of anger. If when she was sad, sometimes she'd express anger. Sometimes when she was happy, she wouldn't know what to do with it. Maybe she'll sit in the happiness for a while, but if it's there too long, she might go to anger eventually because it feels safer for her. From what I can conceptualize about how she used anger, I think anger is very empowering for some people. And I guess when we talk about these anger languages, I almost said love languages, but these anger languages, being able to utilize all of these types of language can make someone feel just empowered to some degree. Like having a righteousness or an indignation is empowering. So, to go back to your question, for as far back as I remember,
It doesn't have to be your first.
rage is comfortable. So that's how I would communicate. I might throw a toy even on my dad's side of the family, in that family, there's a lot of engineers and they're incredibly intellectual. So anger, maybe throwing hurtful words or intellectual words of opposition. So in a lot of ways, much of my childhood was built in that anger. So I guess you would have to reframe it under that context. I don't know what the earliest one has probably been just the way that my childhood has been. So I can't give you an early.
That's fine. So I'll stray away from that. Maybe I should ask, when was the last time you punched someone as hard as you can in the face?
When I was
Yesterday?
taking Krav Maga back when I lived in DC. That's about the last time.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. What's the most common way you express anger?
The most common way I express anger right now, if I were to choose any of these or these if I were to choose any of these keep saying love languages. Anger is a love language. Okay. The most common way I express anger as a language. I'm going to do this process of elimination because I got to think about it. Definitely not distraction. I'm actually bordering between righteousness and indignation. I don't know.
If I
I
had to
actually don't
choose
know.
for you, I would probably say righteous.
So, yeah. And the reason why I think it might be righteousness and indignation, I think I was explosive before. So the indignation, I almost feel like indignation is a degree hotter than righteous. I would react.
Oh,
Indignation would be I would react explosively. There would be sarcasm, there'd be yelling, there'd be slamming doors, throwing things. That was a way that I used to showcase my anger. Now I try to be able to stand up for my values and justice and boundaries, not by dehumanizing others like I did before, but by trying to find a middle ground. So so when I feel that anger, I don't react right away like I used to. I'm not explosive. So I might sit in contemplation for a little while, and then that's how I would do it. How about this? Because you're asking me, I think I'm trying to get a feel of what is this for you? Um because in actuality, I don't really see these as anger. So I see them as reactions. I don't know. Like right now, maybe that's the mismatch that I'm feeling is like I'm seeing anger as different from these languages. And
is
this
this not a
is
good topic then? Or should we just discuss
no,
anger
I
in
think
general?
I don't know because then how are we defining it? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like okay, so let's talk about that. What is anger to you?
Anger to me is, I guess maybe I have a more clear cut idea of what it is. It's when someone raises their voice and they have the dilated pupils and the red face and the clenched fists and the labored breathing. When I see that, I think that's anger.
Interesting because those to me I literally define as physiological responses to an emotion that doesn't necessarily have to be anger. And I can see that as it could be shame coming out as anger or it could be sadness coming out as anger. Like I don't it looks like anger on the outside, but I don't go that person is angry. I might say that that person is dysregulated at the moment or distressed at the moment, but I never go straight to anger when I see somebody red faced, I guess, or yelling because there's some people that yell and they're just really, I'm that person. When I yell, I'm passionate about something. Sometimes it looks like yelling. My husband will say, why are you yelling? I was like, oh, no, no, no. I just want to clarify. I'm really passionate about this subject. And so my volume goes up. And which gets back to the point that sometimes even volume is relative.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, if I see something that presents as anger, I just immediately label it as anger.
I think that's where we're having a mismatch here about
Okay.
anger languages because I don't actually see that as anger. I don't see yelling as anger at all sometimes. I mean, this comes from my mom who even when she's sad, she yells, or even when she's happy, she yells, or so this is why the distinction is not clear for me.
And I think with me, anytime someone raised their voice and would yell, it was always anger. There was
This is
never any subtleties. It was always anger. I am angry at something or someone.
Was it true? Were they angry if you look back?
Yes.
Mm.
So, and
Wow.
I think that's because that was an emotion that was tolerated. That was the emotion that was allowed, at least in the kind of environment that I was raised. You were allowed to show that. Whereas crying or even happiness were anxiety, those were not looked upon favorably. But yelling was okay.
Anger allowed space for a response from other people for you.
Yes.
So did you fake your anger?
No, I was not allowed to show anger.
But other people were.
Yes.
And yet. So I guess I'm having difficulty understanding whether the other people like if it's so accepted, why weren't you allowed to have it? And
Because
they
I was,
were.
because exception.
So everybody else around you was able to display it, but you were the exception.
Yes.
Did you perceive that or did they tell you that?
They told me
Some
that.
Okay.
They said, don't get angry. You're not allowed to get angry.
Wow.
And so what ended up happening, and I think that's you and I have very different experiences growing up with what anger is. So it would turn inward. is what would end up happening. And that would manifest itself in self-harm and kind of disbelief, I guess, indignation. That was always my go-to. Like, I don't know what's going on. There's confusion,
Yeah.
there's disbelief. So that's what ends up happening. And you end up, like I said, yeah, hitting yourself or things like that, punishing yourself somehow. That's where the anger goes.
So is your anger language distraction?
Well, I'm not trying to distract the person. I guess more trying to distract myself.
That's what I'm saying. That's what it can be, where you're not exactly distracting the other person by saying, look here, look over here.
Yeah.
You're literally doing your own distractions. Like in the modern day, it'd be you're going to TikTok or you're going inwardly outside of that conflict.
And I think maybe there is also some justification, like I have it coming because I'm such a horrible person. So that anger was justified. Their anger at me was justified.
Okay, so you justified it. And instead of justifying your point of view, you're justifying their point of view.
Exactly.
Wow.
So,
We are very complicated creatures as human beings.
I guess we are.
Because yeah, I mean, you were heading for, well, I mean, I think you were searching for something that validated your own anger language, but my anger language are not those two things.
Okay. So, and I guess just the actual perception of what it is very different between you and me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So how do we steer the conversation?
I don't know. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe people should realize that anger as a language is so complex that we can't just say it shouldn't exist because it exists in that complexity. I think we should accept, just like we do with love languages, that anger is this hyper nuanced emotion that has, like, we can't, this is probably why nobody has really created and validated anger languages, because we can attack it left and right on a peer review perspective. And even in the whole like modern day conversation that we're having right now about anger, we could attack this model left and right. We can attack it to the point of it's all wrong, which I've been talking about, like this is not anger, this, but maybe anger is just this thing that we need to understand cannot be clearly defined by science.
And maybe I can ask, because last week or the previous podcast, we were talking about, I feel loved when this happens. Like you and I both feel loved with words of affirmation, having that kind of conversation. Are there moments where you can say, I feel something's wrong?
All the time.
And
Yeah.
did-
But I don't go to anger, I guess, is just because something's wrong. It could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be empathy for others. Like there could be so many reasons for this something's wrong. So that's why it's all the time. I can say that.
Okay. I mean, is there a recent time you can think of where you went to anger?
Yeah, and I would roll it up into disappointment as
Okay.
well. I mean, some things that have happened at work that I don't necessarily agree with on an ethical, for my own moral compass and my own ethical reasons, I don't
Right.
agree with. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but I disagree with ethically. And I felt a boiling inside of me of anger. And my self soothing mechanism has been to never react in anger, because I don't know how many times in my life I've written a horrible email and pressed send without any forethought. And so I went into my office and I relaxed and I listened to some music and I calmed down and I then allowed my rational self. So I do a lot of DBT and thinking about Wise Mind. This is how I deal with my anger. I didn't realize there was a model for it. So in DBT, we have the emotional mind and we have the reasonable mind. And then some meld of that is called the wise mind. And so I've been allowing, sometimes my emotional mind might run away with me. It might be rage, it might be anger. And I try to sit in the present moment and allow my reasonable mind to catch up. And the way that I know that my reasonable mind can catch up is that now I have at least three other perspectives of what to do, alternative ways of handling the situation. And that's when I know that my reasonable mind has come to become the wise mind, because I can still feel the emotion. I'm not denying it, but I am allowed to, I guess you could say, understand that emotion and then come to terms with it with some solutions that aren't necessarily ruled by that emotion. So that's how I've been dealing with my anger lately.
And I have to ask, in the past, have there been consequences for sending emails?
Yeah. I've been described as sometimes mean. Looking back, when I did that send right away, it became something more of something I didn't mean. in the long
Mm,
run.
okay.
So it was harsh. It was probably uncalled for. And it was this alternate explanation that spoke more to my rage than it does to my actual values.
And I think it's great that you have a way to understand this is the emotion I'm feeling because a lot of people don't. It took me a while to even start to understand, label those emotions. I wouldn't know what they were.
Well, let's go back to the way that you described anger because you said there was yelling and there was a red face and then pupils dilated. Well, yeah, that could be true sometimes for some people. So for me, I have, when I feel the anger, I feel it in my stomach. I feel a thing inside of me that says I need to speak up. If I don't, then it gets worse. It starts to build on itself, and then my heart rate goes up. So I'm always telling people that these emotions come with a somatic response, with a
Absolutely.
somatic association, which is your body's telling you. And it's going to be different. You can have anger with your significant other and it starts at the heart, you know. But then when you're angry at your parents, it might start at the gut. You know, there are all these patterns that we have, and this is a biological response set from our fight or flight or our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. It all works together and it explains at the fundamental level how we are as humans. So, always being able to tact your emotion alongside how it's affecting your body is really a really good way to understand, right? Like some of these emotions, getting back to your body and getting back to I'm just angry. But yeah, but where do you feel it?
Absolutely. Me, typically, it's the shoulders. They go up in my ears like this is when I'm
Mhm.
feeling some kind of thing like that. And the weird thing too is oftentimes when I'm feeling something like anger, I don't feel it just in the moment. That one instance, for whatever reason, the way my brain works, they say it is neurodivergent, but I don't know. But anyways, you feel all the reasons you've had anger in the past. So all of those culminate. So you're not just dealing with the present, you're dealing with
Yeah.
these thousands of other instances of anger in the past. And then that becomes so overwhelming that you have to just shut down.
I feel so deeply that our body is efficient. All of our bodies are efficient in the fact that we gather information like a computer. And maybe our mind doesn't completely understand what we've gathered, but our body does. And it becomes cell memory. And essentially, sometimes people have anxiety. They don't understand why they have anxiety, but in actuality, it's because your body understands why. It's got cell memory. It's just your brain has protected you from maybe understanding why. And so there has to be some sort of processing that needs to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember when I was young, well, throughout K through 12, I was always getting sick and I just assumed I wasn't taking care of myself. But it
Mm.
wasn't until later that and it was a lot of GI issues. Why am I throwing up all the time? And I just chalked it up to, oh, I'm just a kid. That's normal. But it wasn't until later I understood, no, that's not normal.
Yeah. So that's how we detect our emotions. Our emotions is some meld of our body systems, our biological systems, and we need to start having awareness of how an emotion is also associated with somatic and cell memory to some degree.
Right, and I think a lot of times, I mean, at least in my family, you got results from anger, whether that's throwing something or yelling at there weren't negative consequences necessarily. And I think that might be the case with a lot of people. And I think that's why we're seeing an uptick of so much violence. In
Mhm.
social media, there's so many things. Sometimes it works, or a lot of times it works. And you've never faced any negative consequences. You and I have, obviously. But I think there's people out there that maybe haven't or been rewarded almost for
Wow. So we're really coming to terms with the idea that anger is effective.
absolutely. I think it is.
It makes me sad that anger is effective. But, I will also argue that compassion is equally effective. It's just not as direct.
And it's much more difficult to do.
It's much more difficult to do in the moment. But when done correctly and done strategically, that compassion has long-term solution and it has long-term beneficial impact. Whereas anger, I feel, and we can agree or disagree to this, but anger serves the self and releases a burst of energy just for the self. I think that anger casts out bullets and then the person's receiving shots,
Yes, and
right? Shots fired.
it's an excellent short-term solution. Yes, in the moment, things get resolved, but long term, what happens?
Yeah.
I don't know what is the If, I don't know if you have to create some sort of, not conclusion, but something that we're trying to get at from this conversation. What would you say that would be? What's the main point of the conversation? Because we started off with the 5 anger languages, and it seems like they're not as necessarily applicable or as applicable as Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. Those seem very clear. This seems, I don't know, difficult to pin down because anger is such a nuanced emotion.
I mean, short and sweet, anger is complex. Anger is effective. Anger is a short-term fix. I think what we can do to tie this back to the 5 anger languages is, how do you notice it? How do you see it? If you see it in its healthy versus unhealthy expression, right? What does that look like?
Sure. And what is a
Yeah.
healthy expression? You just
I
talked about
think
it.
I think one of the things I do, right, is that DBT, where I allow myself to be in the moment, recognize my emotion, allow my reasonable mind to enter the fray and to be able to inform my next steps. I think that could be a healthy expression if I were to choose one of these 5 anger languages. It could be a form of distraction. I am being in the present moment. I'm going directly away from the conflict, and that would be a healthy expression of distraction.
Right. And like you mentioned too, and I don't know if I should call it retribution, but if something negative happens to you and you use that anger to say, okay, well, I'll show you,
Yeah.
and that can be good if it's done properly. In other words, if someone tears you down, for instance, I got rejected from a conference recently, my paper did, and I worked so hard on it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll go make it better. And then I'll get accepted to another conference. I think that can be healthy instead of just emailing the conference coordinator and saying, I am going to go over there and punch you or throw hot coffee at you. I don't know. Maybe something like that. Is that fair to say? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a good way to look at it, because when we think about retribution, if I had gone with my first inclination, which is to write a really mean email, right? Just a really mean email, and I just hit that send, that retribution is me pretty much enacting emotional punishment to all and putting them in a place of discomfort for however long that would be,
Yeah.
rather than allowing my more reasonable, and this is what I chose. It was an evil retribution, if we want to go to good and bad, right? The evil retribution versus the good distraction. So I chose the good distraction until I can remain calm, and then I did the right thing in the long run.
And I know you mentioned you don't think it's things in good or bad, but I think there has to be some sort of morality. I don't know. What's a minor inconvenience you've had recently?
Well, here's the thing I think about morality. I'm a
Yeah.
morally fluid person. I mean, look, this is something that I say, and I think that we need to have this distinction about morals and what is morally fluid. Morally fluid doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's me being able to understand that if a mom is going hungry, and if she starts stealing so she could feed her kids, that I will not ever call her somebody that's bad. I feel like she is doing the best she can for her babies, versus somebody who is not morally fluid, who is morally rigid, might say, I'm not saying all of you, but I would say morally rigid people might say stealing is never good under any circumstances.
Right. But I mean, if we start saying everything's relative, then doesn't that become relative in and of itself?
That's why I'm morally fluid. I
But if you
just
say you're
don't
morally
fall in that.
fluid, then you can
Yeah.
never have a sense of right or wrong.
I know that's really hard for you to understand about me, because in general, I think you might perceive me as somebody who is a good person.
I do.
But I understand in a world where people do bad things because they were raised with bad people,
Yeah.
and they have become bad as a consequence, though their heart is good. I understand that I will not be giving them a judgment for that. I won't be
Okay.
like, oh, you're a bad person because, and that's just me. Oh, you're
Okay.
having such a hard time with that.
Okay.
I
Okay.
know, okay, because this is what I know about you, and you can respond back. You think in black and white.
Well, not only that, I'm not very intelligent. That's number 2.
Stop. No, but honestly, is it hard for you to think that things could be relative?
It is, because I think the system starts to crumble if there's no
Hmm.
rules in place. And I know that's something I'm still struggling with myself. So
Yeah, and I maybe come from the idea that There are always cracks in the system, and there's always crumbling, and can always rebuild to make a better system. That the system should never stay the same if the people in it are unhappy and suffering. So, because of
Okay.
that, I have a deep understanding that the cracks do exist and there is no such thing as black and white. And that's why maybe anger for me is not so black and white as it is for you. The
Right.
simple person of somebody yelling, the simple fact that somebody can just be yelling and turning red is enough to say that's anger. But for me, I look at that and I go, wow, what's underneath that? What volcano is brewing that has caused this red yelling person in front of me?
And I can certainly empathize with people, but yeah, I guess maybe the labeling of it might be not as clear cut as I once thought it was.
I think labeling in general, this is just my general rule. I think labeling is shit. I hate labeling people. I don't feel like we should ever label people. But if labeling helps you with your identity, I just want you to know you can be fluid with that too. You know what I mean? Like we can't just constantly say we are always this fixed snapshot in time. I think that labeling does that to people, unfortunately.
I know the conversation took a, well, maybe it's not so
No, it
so
still has
strange
to
of a
do with
turn.
anger
It does.
because I think
Labeling.
this is maybe a conversation about anger, that anger is relative and anger doesn't necessarily have to be the strict emotion. And maybe it's a form of miscommunication, right? Like we are misperceiving the person in front of us when they're maybe not really angry, but really maybe they're in distress because they're hungry and they're cold and they're tired.
Why is it so easy to label love?
I don't think it's easy to label love.
It's easier, maybe we would say, because
I
it
think
seemed like
maybe
the conversation we had previously, much easier to discuss. This is anger is, I don't know. It's confusing for me. It's
yeah.
complex. There's a lot of things I don't know.
I think maybe, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you accept love as a journey, that it has a light and a dark. Anger feels more like light or dark to you.
Yes.
So if you don't accept it as a journey on its own, then I think maybe it's going to be hard to look at it just like we do with love.
I didn't mean for the
Well,
conversation to get so,
so philosophical, but what
yeah.
we did do is throw out the 5 anger languages and say it's all bullshit. So
Well,
sorry, guys.
okay. Well, no, I don't want to say that because I at least,
Well, what do you want to say? What do you, okay, throwing back that question,
uh,
what
um,
is this conversation about?
okay, you know
What
what it
would you
is?
like the message to be for you?
I just want to assure the people that wrote the 5 anger languages that they're valuable people and they came up with a good idea, and maybe just not everyone agrees with it.
I give them a silver star, but not a gold star. Whoever did this, you
Okay,
get a silver star. That's
that's all
still
I
good.
wanted. That's all I want to do.
Everybody gets a star. They just don't get the best star.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
And I'm okay hurting people's feelings. Please don't mistake that for anger.
But yes, I would agree with you. But the silver star yeah, there's always room for improvement.
Especially when it comes to anger. I don't know what people will take from this, but I think maybe the take home is that anger depends on maybe how we learned what anger means, how it's been normalized for us. And anger depends on like how we react in anger has a lot to do with some combination of how we think about anger and how our body feels it. And I think that's the same for all emotions, that our emotions come with a somatic friend, a somatic parallel experience, and that we should start understanding that these are things that are a part of who we are, especially as a human species, because it's part of our fight or flight response, which also includes fawning and freezing and all these F's that we have come to know now in the present day. And yeah, I think that what we can say here is that you and I disagree on what the definition of anger. So without a good definition of a particular variable, in this case anger, it's hard to prop up a model like that there are 5 anger languages, right?
Right. And I think maybe one thing we can agree on is it's important to recognize those signs in your body. I had a psychiatrist tell me once, there's that adage, the more you resist, the more it persists. And I think that can get dangerous because that's what I was doing. I was trying to stuff things, or I was trying to not understand things for what they were. And maybe even anger is a part of that too, not understanding that. Yeah, just understanding, keeping an eye on your body, taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and these are negative emotions we're talking about.
Yeah.
Even though we thought that this primary discussion was anger, these are negative emotions. And I think negative emotions are not as clear to understand for anyone as positive emotions.
It's difficult to sit with them, and
Yeah.
you want to get rid of them as quickly as possible, but it's
Yeah.
important to sit with them.
It's important to sit and understand them and
Yeah.
process them.
Yeah.
So I don't know what this podcast episode is about, but we also know that life is complex, emotions are complex. We define them differently. The more negative the emotion, the harder it is to define, and we know that they're layered. I like to look at negative emotions like anger and sadness as an onion that has a story on its own. It
Is
could
there
probably
another
hold. No, it's perfect. It
metaphor?
smells. It smells awful if you
But I
don't
always
cook
hear
it.
that metaphor. I think we need a better metaphor.
No, well, you make that up then, but I know that that onion of sadness or anger will come with things like fear and shame and guilt.
I'll start workshopping it. I'm sure there has to be a better metaphor, right? Okay, you know what it is? Not that it's not good. It's just I hear it all the time. That's what it is.
You're just over it.
Yeah.
But you got to deal with it because
It's
it's an
good.
onion.
No, it's a great metaphor. I just wish we had another one.
All right. Stay tuned for the next episode of Speakeasy Doctors, where Dr. J over here will figure out another metaphor for it. All right. We'll see you all another week. All right. Bye.